Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to the shop. We are going to be having fun today doing angled dovetails on the tote. Now I've been getting so many questions about this, people saying, wow, I don't know if I could do this whole project because of those angled dovetails. I've never done angled dovetails before. So we're going to make this very simple and very easy for today. So that'll be what we're working on. If you haven't seen this project yet, we're going through making a tote. And I chose making this because there's a lot of different things. There's the dovetails, there's resawing work on it, there's doing grooves, there's doing dados, there's the bent handle, and then all of this can be made without any glue. So we're going to be going through this step by step in each of the lives. Last week we went through choosing the lumber, cutting them down, putting the angles on the two sides, as well as cutting the grooves. So today we're going to be looking at cutting the dovetails into this. And then next week we're going to be making the bottom and the side and doing some resawing. Ooh. So yeah, that is what we're working on right now. A few things coming up in the Wood by Wright world. Number one, a week from Friday, I'm going to be down in just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, in Madison, Georgia. There is basically the largest tool meet all of the South will be down there. It is the Peach Meet. It's held Friday and Saturday. You have to be a member of the MWTCA in order to attend, but you can show up that morning and become a member at the gate and get in and see all of the tools. So I will also be doing live videos while we're there. So I'm really looking forward to that. And there was something else on the list coming up. I don't remember what it was. Oh well, it doesn't matter, I guess.
No, you did Frozen Otter. No, this is your last big
Yeah,
thing.
I know. I just got back from doing Frozen Otter, so I am alive still. Thank you for everyone who followed along with that. It was a lot of fun. Now I have to go back next year and actually complete the thing. Why are you glaring at me, babe?
The life insurance policy will still be there.
Yes. So yes, that is what we have going on. Now last week I did it in, my first one I did in alder, and the project I had was in alder. And alder is a great learning wood. It's very soft and easy to work with. But I wanted to do this one in oak. So I've been catching up and redoing all the pieces. So I have them in oak here that we will be going on from this. So today we're actually making the dovetails in this, which I've already done 3 of the 4 sides. So by the end of today we can put it all together and have our tote ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to be starting with the end caps. Now here is what they're going to look like when we are done. So you have your top, your 45 down either side. There's a groove on the inside here, and then whatever angle we put the splay of the 2 sides at. And then of course dovetails. And so I've done this on one side already, and we're going to do this on the other side. Yeah. Oh, and this is, I completely forgot to say this last time. Put labels on all of your work. And so on all of my end boards here, let me actually switch over to this so you can see what I'm talking about. Helps if I turn on the camera. On all of my boards, I actually go through and then label them all, what they are. So in this one I have, this is the right end, this is the outside, and this is corner number 1 and corner number 2. This is corner number 3 and corner number 4. And I always number the corners, not the boards themselves. And that way I can always line up my joints. Number 1, which is this end of the board, goes with number 1 here. So A goes with A. Slide those in together, and you've got yourself a nice joint. And so numbering the corners makes it much easier to remember which ones go together. Because remember, we're hand cutting these. So no matter how accurate we are, they're all going to be ever so slightly different. So we're making these pins match these tails, and we're making these pins match these tails. So we're being very specific about which ones go on which side. So you want to make sure you mark your corners so you know which ones actually go together. But today we're going to be working with corner number 2. Any questions so far while I'm setting this up?
No.
Cool. I can actually talk about things now. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to be getting the side, which has corner 2 to corner 2, and we're going to put inside up. So we're going to be looking at the inside of the board, and we're going to hold this in place where it will intersect with the actual joint. So let me bring this up here so you can see this deviator. And this will then allow us to do specific layout of where these boards, drop the clicker on the floor. There we go. This will allow us to have specific layout of where these go in. So I can actually line these up Make sure everything is right where I want it. Tight on the corner there, tight on the corner there. Hold this board in place. Try not to wiggle it around too much. And then I'm going to mark the end of it here. And I want to know where it stops here. Because where it stops here is where we're going to be cutting this corner right here. And so you can see how in this, what it will basically end up looking like. We need to be able to cut this angle down, but we need to know where to put this corner at. The next thing we need to do is we need to make the mark in. How thick is the board we're putting into it? And that is how thick is this board. So we're going to set that on here. And we're going to put our marking gauge on here. And we're going to let the marking gauge slide down to the board it's touching. And we're going to set it at that. Now I already have it set to that height. So it is going to get this exact thickness. So even if for some reason our board has a thickness that varies from end to end, we can pull this exact thickness and put it onto here. And we can grab this board and we can mark down the end of the board. So now we have our depth stop for how deep our dovetails are. Flip it over. Do the same thing on the other side. And I like to have a really deep depth stop line on there. Some people really don't. You might want to scratch it a little lighter. Then we also want to have a line on here. Now there's two different ways we could do this. We could grab a square and we can connect the line we drew right across. Or I can just keep this and make sure that it's referencing off of this side of the board here, flat on here, and I can still draw my line across. Because remember, we're measuring the board thickness this way. So even though it's at an angle, it's still giving us that line exactly where I want it, as long as I'm referencing off of this face and not trying to make it square to this face. Hope that makes sense. So now we know how deep our dovetails need to go all the way around. The next thing we need to do is actually lay them out. Where are we going to put them on here? Now it's at this point I have to explain why this is an angled dovetail, but this is also not an angled dovetail. The dovetail is at an angle, but actually the board is at the angle because the dovetail is perfectly square and regular. So this is just like any other dovetail you've ever cut that's a standard 90 degree. It's just the whole project is turned. And to make that a little bit clearer, I have, where did I put that? Oh, I left it over by Sarah. Oh no, I brought it over here, good. Okay, so imagine for a second, this is a dovetail drawer. I've tried to find a dovetail drawer around my shop. I don't have one right now. I was going to go pull one out of the dresser, but then thought that wouldn't be very good.
It depends which one you pull.
I'll bring down my underwear drawer. So if this was dovetails here, which is a standard 90 degree dovetail, what we're doing with this is we're taking the dovetail drawer and we're doing this to it. Nothing has changed on the dovetails. Nothing has changed in the jointery. It's just the orientation of the box. So once you understand that, you realize this isn't an angled dovetail. This is just a regular dovetail where we've turned the box. So that is all we're going to be doing for this. And it's one of these cool things that you can show people like, ooh, look at this, angled dovetails. And there's nothing to this that's any different from any other dovetail you've ever cut. It's a straight square dovetail. It's just the box is turned. So let me show you how the layout on this goes. Any questions while I'm setting this up?
Oh, but when you did your little ditty, it made me think of if I were a rich man, and I was like, if I were a dovetail. Sorry, I'm
if I were a dovetail. Sorry. You can blame my wife for that. Ooh, focus. There we
usually
go.
do.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. Okay, so we've got our board here. And we've got the mark that we made. Which side was it? Ah, here it is. This is where the board ends, where it intersects with that. So you can put that on here. And so the board we're laying, oops, I slid. Don't slide. Don't go too heavy in the first one. Go medium on the second one, and then go heavy once it's in. So for instance, what we've got is this board will be intersecting here. So we need to know we're going to be putting our tails on this board and our pins on this board, so we need them to be able to slide in there. But first we need to know is actually where is the end of this board going to be, because we're going to be cutting off this corner here in a little bit. So we drew that line on there. Now I'm going to be using some dividers to measure this off. Now what I want to do is I want the first tail to be above this groove so we don't have a notch out in the pin. So I'm going to set my dividers on here, and I'm going to set them to the height from this bottom corner to the top of the groove, and that will let me know that when I cut the tail at that point, I'm going to be missing this groove. So I'm going to take that same measurement, and I'm going to come up here to the line I had, and I'm going to put a mark here. And now I know that when my first tail is over here, it's going to be the same distance in from the end as on the other side. I don't care what that measurement is. It could be 5 inches, it could be 10 inches, it could be a 3/4 .96. I like that one.
We're getting invaded.
Uh-oh, kids coming in the shop.
Oh, well, thank you.
Just drawing this line here too.
You're done reading. Good night. Love you.
Now, I'm going to have 2 tails on here. So just like this, let's do this one. There we go. So we're going to have 2 tails on here. And this one I was kind of experimenting with doing a slightly smaller tail and a bigger tail, and I was like, it could be done right. And I think if I had 3 tails and I made them progressively bigger, that would be kind of interesting and fun to do. But then on the other ones, I've just decided to lay them out. So I want to find out where the middle of that board actually is. So I'm going to use my divider, and I'm going to step off 1, 2. Then I'm going to come back over this line, and I'm going to step off 1, 2. And these lines almost intersect, and that will allow me to see approximately where center is. And I'm going to push these 2 pins in again, just like that. And so I know these holes are pretty close to center, and they're eyeballed in place. I mean, if you really wanted to get out, you could measure out precisely where center is, but in this case, eyeball is good enough. But I know that the spacing between these two is going to be the same spacing that's on the end here and the same spacing that's on the end here. So I'll have a visual separation there. Uh-oh, kids invading again. So now we can set the mark on there, draw our line across, nice and square to the side.
What are you talking about? Where did you get a tear? Stop biting your hand.
I don't know. I don't remember which page.
Problems of a 6-year-old.
Oh, on your book you got a
So
tear.
let's put this in here.
Okay, that's okay.
This is hard to do with the camera on that side. I normally step over to that side. So there we go. We have our lines, which you probably can't see. Let me see if I can mark these out so you can see them.
Okay.
Let's see. We've got,
So you should look.
where are we at? This is the end of the board here. This is one side of the tail, the other side of the tail, another tail here, and then the other side of the far tail here.
Can I watch?
Now, to cut the dovetails, I'm actually going to be using a Cat's Moses dovetail jig tonight. A lot of times I like to eyeball it, but sometimes when I want to be really accurate and I want them to all look great, this is one that I pull out from time to time. I don't do it that often, but tonight I feel like I want to make these really, really nice. So I'm going to pull this out. If you don't know what this is, I've got a link to it in the description below. Cat's Moses dovetail jig. It allows you to hold the dovetail saw just like you would normally, but with this it keeps it on track. So the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to, and this is the other question people are going to ask me, which side of the line do you stay on? And at this point it really doesn't matter, because whatever you do on here, you'll make the pins match. So I'm going to start on here by just nicking a little bit of a line. And I want to put a kerf in there before I use the jig. That will make everything a little bit easier. It also lets the set of the teeth go in below the wood so that they're not scoring up the jig. And then another one here. And you also notice I'm not worrying about what angle I'm at. I'm just putting a slight kerf in there, and that will hold the saw in place so I can put the jig on here and slide it over. I can move the I can't move the camera. Let me see if I can move the camera over here. Let me switch over to this one. Sorry, things are going to get a little funky. Let me see if I can move. Any questions on doing this?
No questions.
Quiet night.
Well,
I've been doing a lot of talking.
I'm restraining myself in the comments at the moment.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, here, Richard Wright just posted. Is he going to mark the waist bits?
Marking the waist will tell me which side of the line to cut on. And in this case, it really doesn't matter which side of the line to cut on, because whatever I cut these at, I'm going to make the pins that match. So I could come in here and mark out this is waist, and this is waist, but it really doesn't matter, because telling what waist is more which side of the line you're going to cut on. I mean, later on when you come in to chop them out, it becomes a little bit more obvious because you're making tails, but it's always a good idea. So I'm going to put this into that little kerf I made, put the jig on here, and I'm going to pinch the jig against the board and then hold the saw in place. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to focus more on driving the saw than keeping the saw at the right angle. And I can just use this to cut right down to that edge.
I have a question when you get to a question part.
And then I'm going to move over here. I'm going to do this side. I'm going to skip a line and go over to the next one, because I'm going to just do all from one side of the tail. Just like that. What's the question?
Nicholas Espiritu asked, what is the ratio on the dovetail you are going with?
This one is a 6-to-1.
6 to 1.
I like them pretty steep. I also have an 8-to-1, which I use quite a bit. If you really want to get technical, theoretically, you're supposed to use a 6-to-1 on softwoods and an 8-to-1 on hardwoods, but it really doesn't matter. And anytime someone tells you you've got to use this on this particular wood or this particular, throw it out the window. You can do whatever you want to do. This is your project. And honestly, the difference between 6-to-1 and 8-to-1 and 10-to-1, it really isn't going to make any difference in 90% of the projects you do. So now what I've done with this jig is, because there's only one angle on here, I actually had to rotate the board around so that I can cut the other sides of all the tails. Oop, come on, switch back over. There we go. And so now we can do the exact same thing we did on this side, only we're going to do it with the other two halves of the tail. I think it's almost time to sharpen this saw. It's probably been about a year or so since I've sharpened this one.
Yeah.
There. We've cut down the side walls of all of our tails here. Now the next thing I want to do is actually cut off this 45-degree angle on the other side here. So to do that, we're going to switch around a few things. Any questions on doing that? Move the camera back over here.
No.
Cool. I just got to get myself a little bit of space here. And so what I have is I have an unsquare, which is a square at 45 degrees. I love having these in the shop. I don't use them that much, but when I need to mark something at 45 degrees, this is phenomenal. So where did I put that mark? There's that mark. So now what I want to do is I want to mark off this angle on this side. So let's turn this camera back around again. Oh, to have a camera. I should really train one of my kids to be a cameraman. That would probably end poorly.
Oh no, JJ would just have a running commentary the entire time.
Yeah, he would. So earlier, we marked off where the end of the board was, and where the end of the board then intersects with this baseline is the corner of the board. So I can set this on here, and then line that up with that very corner, and mark it back this way. So just like that, we now have our line that we can cut at. Now, I'm going to flip this up a little bit. Make sure that I'm in here. I'm going to lift this up here, and I'm going to draw that line across.
Wait, do you think you're talking to that other camera?
Oh, am I not on that camera? I'm sorry. Here, let me go back and show you this. So what I've done here is I have this, the very corner of the board. So when we took our board and we set this on here, we marked off the end of the board, and where that intersects with our depth of cut is the very corner of the board.
Wow,
so I can set this on here.
It's a really shiny board.
What's that?
It's like bright.
Is it bright? Let me try my ISO. Oh no. I just lost feed. Here we go.
Well, it's less bright now, but it's really blurry.
Auto. Yeah. Turn back. There's that better?
Yeah, well, once it's, yes.
Okay.
It's not blinding.
So I can put this on here and then mark 45 degrees from that point straight back to here. And then I can use that to come up on top of here. Oop, back out a little bit. And I can come into wherever that point intersected right here. Put this on. Draw that across. And if I really want to get fancy, I could come onto this side and then do the exact opposite. Find that point there. Set the square up against it. And draw that back down this way. And so theoretically, this line is perfectly parallel with the line on the other side of the board. But this is the line I trust, and so this is the line I'm probably going to be cutting on. So to cut on it, I'm going to put it on the vise, and I want that line to be vertical, so it just makes it easier to cut down. And then we can cut it. I know, this is a phenomenal idea. You cut a line. So just like before, I'm going to, actually I'll move the camera back on this. Any questions while I'm doing that?
Let's see, what did Mathew Anderson say? What are the 10% of projects that the angle of a dovetail does matter?
Honestly, if you are going to be building something that's going to be under incredible stresses, then it might matter. But when I say 90%, I mean really like 99.9%. I honestly can't think of a project off the top of my head that would have so much stress that it would be needing that. So I'm going to pinch the board here and then let it slide against my fingernail. Nick it in place. Get that cut all the way across the top. Ooh, oh my. I thought I was established. I was not. There, now I'm established. And then I'm going to cut down the board on my side so I can see the line. And then I can turn it around. Actually, we do that over on this side. And then I can do the same thing on the other side. It's one of the things I like about having a vise that goes all the way across. And oh no, our saw isn't deep enough to cut all the way across. Whatever shall we do? We're going to break it. Break it. I don't know why, I really enjoy that. Because all of this over here we're going to be cutting off in a second. So breaking off that little excess is all we need to do. So now we need to cut off, and so at this point, this should start to look like the end of a regular dovetail board. So we need to cut off this waist and punch out what's in the middle.
Oh, hang on.
What?
It's really blurry.
Is it blurry?
It's really blurry.
Oh wow, that is blurry. There we go. So this should start to look like the end of a regular board. Now we just need to cut off this waist and chop out what's in the middle. Where to put the clicker again? One. There we go. So to chop out the waist, it's just like it is with any other dovetail. Put it in the vise, follow the line down the outside. Any questions while I'm doing these?
Nope.
Man, I was scheduling today to have all these little breaks to have questions like normal. When cutting down on dovetail lines, or any joinery line, some people really try to stay away from the line and then chisel back to it. And I like to actually train myself to cut really close to the line. And I try and cut as close to it as I possibly can, as close to it as I accurately can. And then I'll come back in and check it with a square and see if I need to adjust it. But if anything, I'll stay away from it a little bit. So now we've cut that down. Turn this back on. There we go. 2. So you're not seeing this one. Now I'm going to grab my chisel, and the corner of the saw never gets all the way down into the corner. So you got to clean out just a little bit in the corner here. Just like that. And now we can check for square. So we can put this on here and then bring it up to the edge. And oh lolly, we're square. So there's always little burrs and edges on here. So I'm going to take a really fine file and just clean it. If I need to adjust anything, I'd actually use the file to adjust things. But basically right off the saw, there we go. So we can flip this over and then do the same thing again on this side. But on this side, I haven't drawn this line yet. So we can put this in here. I got a little bit of junk to get rid of here. Just clean that up a bit. So we can put our square in here. Go right up to our depth of cut mark here. Draw our line all the way across. And theoretically, that should match up with the line over here. So now we can do the same thing we did before. Pinch the board, let the saw slide on the thumbnail. Get an established cut. Line yourself up vertically. And cut down. Going in a steep angle so I can always see the line on my side. And then I can lean over the board a little bit. I'm off the line just a little bit on the side, but in the right direction. There we go. Have to clean that one up a little bit with the chisel. And now we can grab our chisel, get that junk out of the corner again. And this one, I was a little ways away from the line. Oop. Yeah, you're a little dull, but not bad. Just want to clean that right back to the line. Just a little bit. Then we can set the square on there and see. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Nice and square all the way across. Grab the file, which has disappeared on me again. Oh, probably the closest tool to my face. Just clean up the edges. Make them nice and smooth. So now we need to get rid of the junk in between here. And this is one of my favorite places because we get to use a chisel to chop things out. So let's move things back around. Then normally when I'm doing, helps if I hit the right button. Normally when I'm doing these, I'm going to do them in gangs. So in other words, I'll do all of the tails at one time, and then I'll do all of the pins at another time. And that way I can do processes together. So I'm not having to switch back and forth like this. I'm just switching back and forth once. But for today, we're doing each step one time, so it takes a little bit longer. So I'm going to use a hold fast here and lock it down into the bench.
I got questions.
What's that?
Okay, so let's see. Dennis Meko asks, is that a metal file or a wood rasp that you must have been using?
It is a metal file.
Okay. And Jim Lee wants,
really fine file.
Wants to know, how do you decide which board gets tails and which gets pins?
Well, in this case, that's actually pretty easy because of the way we are doing this. The handle has pins through it, and the handle actually keeps the two end pieces together. So the handle is stopping these two end pieces from sliding out. So if I have tails on the end pieces, then the sides have to slide in. So the movement is on the end pieces sliding off. And so if the handle is stopping the end pieces from sliding off, then it's what's holding the joint together. There's no glue holding this together because the handle is keeping this in place. If I switched it around and I put the pins onto the end boards and the tails on the sideboards, well then these sideboards could just fall straight off. There's nothing holding these on. So that's why we're putting the tails on the ends and the pins on the sideboards. So what I've done is set this in here up against my, my holdfast, and I'll set the opposite corner here up into the holdfast, give it a light tap, or a medium tap.
I was like, that's loud.
And then I'm going to set this in here, and I'm going to stay a little ways away from my line, about a 1/16 inch or so. Light tap, and then we can pair back to that line at a 20-degree angle-ish, something like that. And then chop in a little deeper, and it's going to be rinse and repeat. Chop down, pair out. Chop down, pair out.
When was the last time you had to rinse and repeat?
That's a really good question, babe. What questions we got?
Well, not necessarily related, but Tim BBQ asked, where's your cool little adjustable wrench?
It's over on the lathe. Maybe I'll show you guys that tonight. The lathe video hopefully will be coming out later this week. Eric and I have been going through getting that set up. So what I've done here is I've chopped down about halfway and paired back to it. And now I'm going to come back right into that line. And sometimes I leave a little bit too much meat there, and so I have to go about halfway to the line. And my eyeball the chisel being vertical. Tap it straight down. Move it over to the other side. Eyeball it vertical. Tap it straight down. So now we've chopped out from this side. Loosen the holdfast. Flip the board over. Knock out the junk. And do the same thing again on this side. Get it about a 1/16 inch away from the line. Tap. Tap. And then pair back. And some people might be wondering why the blue tape is on my chisel. I'm actually in the middle of doing a chisel test. We're doing 16 chisels. And I know a lot of people are saying, wow, everyone's done a chisel test. You know, if you look at any woodworking magazine that's done a chisel test, well, none of them have ever done an actual scientific testing of sharpness. And I've found, actually a friend of mine sent me a link to a sharpness tester, and it will actually give you a mathematical number for how sharp your tool is. And so we're going to be doing a bunch of testings with that and test the sharpness before and after the work, and how many strokes on a plate does it take to get down to that sharpness. So same thing again, put it in the line, eyeball vertical, tap it down, set it into the line, eyeball vertical, tap it down, and there's our tail. How are we doing for time? 36. Okay, we're not bad. So now what I want to do is I'm going to put it back into the vise here, because I'm going to need to clean up a little bit. I'm probably out of focus. Sorry about that. Yeah, you want to focus on my rags. That's a much better thing to focus on. There, that's better. And so I'm going to clean up any little burrs or fuzzes on the inside. And then we're going to check it for square. Make sure everything is the way we want it to be. And okay, we got a little bit of a rise in the middle. And so I can take the file and I can work in the middle here. And we'll check it again. And still a little bit. Okay. I'm actually going to do it with a chisel then. I just actually have a bit of a bump here in the middle. Apparently, when I was eyeballing down, I was not quite vertical. There. That should do it. That's one of the great things with the square, is it allows you to guarantee you are what you want to be. There we go. So there is our end. Now we need to make the pins. Flip back over to 1. Now we need to make the pins in here. And one of the fun things about cutting with the hand is, as opposed to like a router, I can make those pins whatever they need to be to match this. They don't have to all be the same. I don't have to make pins this end that are identical to pins on this end. I can make them completely different. As long as these pins line up with these tails, that's all that matters. So I'm going to put that into the vise here, and I want to transfer, I'm going to put this into the vise, and I want to transfer the markings from the tails that we just created into these pins. So let's switch back over to this. Come on, switch. There we go. Back out. There we go. So what I'm going to do is grab my block plane, set it on its side here, slide the board down until it is perfectly parallel on top of the block plane. And I can make these two surfaces coplanar. And then I can move the block plane away, and I know that this is the same height as this. So when I take my board here, and I want to put it on this way, I can line everything up. Now the important thing is this bottom corner here. So I'm going to set this bottom corner on here, and I'm going to swing it around, and I'm just going to eyeball down, put it right in place, and when I get it exactly where I want, put my weight on top of here, get my marking knife, and I'm going to mark this out exactly where these intersect. And now you get to hear my beautiful breathing.
So
Is
I
that
have
better?
a question.
Just a second before we get that. So now this is the point where you do want to mark these off. So I'm going to grab a marker here. And with this is here, I'm going to put an X on the areas that I want to get rid of. Because it's incredibly important that I cut on the right sides of the line here. If I cut on the wrong side, these gaps become bigger and everything becomes sloppy. And that's usually where people go wrong, is that they're cutting on the wrong side of the line. What you got?
So Tad Fleming said, so regardless of the angle of the joint, the dovetails themselves need to be square relative to pin versus tail to be effective. Am I interpreting that right?
Yes. Unless you're actually doing angled dovetails, which I have a video on doing that. I made Sarah's step stool. In which case, in that actual angled dovetails is rather than being at 90 degrees this way, they're like this. So that's where things get wrong. And basically the only difference there from this is rather than using a square, we're then using a bevel gauge. And so you're putting a bevel gauge at whatever angle you decide to put them at. And then any place you would use a square, you're now going to use a bevel gauge to check that angle. So it's kind of just a mental process on that. Now, one of the fun things...
Hey.
What's that?
Alan has done a
Alan?
super chat.
Oh, super chat. Oh, yes. Sarah's got a...
I've got a mom joke.
Okay, she's got a mom joke. What is it, baby?
Okay, hang on. Let's see.
I'm waiting with bated breath.
Do you know why skeletons are so calm?
Why are skeletons so calm?
Because nothing gets under their skin.
I got it.
I got more, but I'll save them.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, let me go back to this one then. So one of the cool things about the Cat's Moses dovetail jig is we used this one here to put the saw at the right angle this way. Now it's got these sides here, so if I turn it this way, now it's going to turn the saw this way, so I can have this at the exact same angle, either that way or that way. So this way I can use this to cut both the pins and the tails. Let me move this back over at this side so you can see that again. See my shirt up close, because that's really cool. Oh, stink, I'm caught. Ah! There, that's better. Pan down. There we go. So now we can set this on here. So I'm getting the right thing here. Now, before we go, I'm going to make those same curves again but I'm going to put them on the right side of the line. Just a little bit of a curve. Making sure I'm on the correct side of the line. Sign with the X. Now we can bring this over here. We can set it into our curve. Let the magnets hold it in place. Lock it down. And we can cut down to depth. And we can trust the jig to keep the saw vertical, so we're cutting nice and square, and keeping it at the right angle to match the angle we cut earlier. Once we've done both of these, we can just turn this around and then cut the other side with this side of the jig. Just like that. It is a cool jig. I don't use jigs very often, but when I want them to be really nice and sharp, this is usually what I pull out. There we go. Then put that into the mark. Lock it down. There we go. Now, we need to cut out the waste in between these. And that's going to seem really familiar because we just did that a moment ago, didn't we? Oh, that's why. I cut down the depth mark on one side of the board, but I didn't cut it on the other side. So I need to do that so I know where to chop. Where did I put my marking gauge? It just rolled away on me, didn't it? I just had it a moment ago.
I don't have it.
That's the way tools work, isn't it? They always just disappear. Oh, it's right there in front of my face. So now we can mark the depth on this side.
So, poor man wants to know how you feel about Bob Vila. Well, they came up
Great.
that you should be Al in Home Improvement if it got a reboot. So. You grew up watching Bob Vila's.
Yeah. No, all the power tool channels. I grew up watching that. So the same thing we did before. Hold fast, set it in place, and usually I want to do all my chopping right over top of the leg on my vise so that all the force goes into the leg straight down into the concrete. And so it's a really solid connection. If I do it out here, there's a little bit of flex in the bench, and it just feels soft. But if I do it over my leg, it feels really good. What are you laughing about?
Oh, Thad Fleming said it would be kind of odd to have a hand tool guy selling Binford power tools. But maybe you could bring back the gang that used to play on like the trash cans and the tools.
Yeah. I do want to learn to play the saw one of these days. So this is just like we did before. Stay away from the line. Chop down, pare back, and chop down, pare back. Turn this on again. Come on, focus. There we go. And then we chop down, pare back, go about halfway down. And to give you guys a little idea of time-wise, when I'm not teaching, I'm not showing this. Earlier today, I did all three other ends in 35 minutes. So a little over 10 minutes per end. Just because you kind of get into a groove and they go pretty quickly. Okay, down about halfway. So now I'm going to go right into that marking gauge line. Eyeball it vertical. Now in this case, I'm actually going to need to turn the chisel this way so that I'm following the angle of the pin. And same thing on this side. Right into that marking gauge line. And then we can flip the board over and do it from the other side. You having fun with the comments tonight?
I'm actually just trying to keep up with them at the second.
Oh, sorry. Am I talking too much? All right. Now, sometimes I've had it on the pins where it gets too small on this side and I have to go to a smaller chisel. But I laid these ones out so that I could just barely get my 1/2-inch chisel in here. Some people really like tiny little thin pins, and I've never much cared for that.
All right,
But
I got a couple
everyone's a little different.
chisel
What's that?
questions going on here. So, let's see. Charles Kyler asks, is that an Aldi's chisel?
Yes, it is.
And then Alan wants to know, what's the blue tape doing on the chisel?
Just talked about that a bit ago. I'm in the middle of doing a chisel test. So I have 16 chisels that we're testing, and the Aldi's chisel is one of them. And the Aldi's chisel is number 2.
He had to step away for a few minutes, so he probably missed that.
Oh, that's one of the fun things about live. Different people come in at different times. Almost through. One more time down. Here we go. It's going to pop. Here we go. So let's clean these out. Then we can go right into that line. And we make sure that we tip it at an angle to go back. We need to tip it at an angle and clean back the other way. Do the same thing again on this side. And then we can do the clean out on this. So I'm going to bring this over, put it into the vise, focus the camera. There we go. And we need to do a little bit of detail work in here. So there's some junk that's stuck up inside here. And on the pin side, there's always a little bit something that's in there. So flatten that out. Just like that. Then let's check this for square. That is well within tolerance. That's a little high on this side. Am I off the line? Yeah, I'm off the line. That's why. So checking with the square, I can see I'm high on this side and low on the other side, but that's because when I cut into that marking gauge line, I didn't actually cut into the marking gauge line. It was a little bit above it. Just come back like that. One of the reasons why I like to check for square, so that I know, hey, that's more like it. That's what I'm looking for. All right, now, the moment of truth. The moment of truce, let me make sure what number I'm on, 2. And I want to grab a board that says 2. And so theoretically, these two should slide together perfectly.
I thought you were going to say puberty.
They should slide together puberty. Now, when I just do them by hand, I find that it's like a 50-50 chance. When I do it with the Cat's Moses dovetail jig, it's like 9 out of 10 times that they tend to slide together. So this might be one of those 10, or it might be one of the 9. So let's see what we get here. Oh, I think it's one of the 9, no, one of the 10, or the 1. Oh, no, I think I might. Where's my mallet? There it is. Let's see what we got here. Oh, wow. That's pretty. Okay, I've got a little bit of wedging action in there. So I think I just need to clean this one up just a little bit. It fits down in there, but it's not perfect. It's plenty usable. What I've got is I need to clean out this side of this pin just a little bit more. So take them apart, put them on the bench here, and then just drop it down. And you'll get a really nice clean pull out on there. And I can see in here that there's a bit of bruising. See if I can get this over here and show you that. Yeah, I don't think I'm able to get that angle. Do that. You can see this line right here on the edge. Right here on the edge, where it's kind of crushing the fibers, and then it pushed this over. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of a heavier file. Let me grab, which file do I want? I want this one. Just a regular metal file. And I'm going to ease this over. Till we're close to that line. Let's see what that gives me. Ah, yeah, see, that's what I'm looking for right there. And then right down to depth. That's what I'm looking for. That's happy. So there we go. There is our so-called angled dovetail. And what I can do with this is I can get one. Let's put one in here, and I think this is the one that, no, this one's good. And we can then bring in this and put this together. Go in, and go in, and go in. Tap this down. This is where I get a bit excited. Everything comes together, and there is the shape of our tool tote. And if you've done it right, the groove inside should match up corner to corner all the way around. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Two, one, change, there we go. You can see how the corner here, the groove, matches up all the way around. And I get a nice tight fit all the way across there. And then this angle comes down in and flush into this. And we'll be cleaning these up a little bit later. We'll be planing them down and smoothing it out, making sure everything is on there. But there is our tote so far. Now, a little bit about next week. Next week we're going to be getting into the resawing of the bottom. Come on, helps if I hit the right button. We're going to be resawing in the bottom. So we have the rest of our 1x6, and we're going to cut this to the exact length, and then we're going to resaw this thing down. Oh my, scary. So we're going to be talking about a lot of little details and things about how do you resaw. And the reason I'm doing this in this project is this step scares a lot of people. And it shouldn't. This is something that can be very, very fun. Resawing doesn't have to be this tedious thing that is incredibly scary. Once you understand a few basics and you follow it, this can be a revolutionary thing and completely change woodworking. So we're going to be going through this step by step and actually talking through how can you do resawing easily and accurately and cleanly, and turning this into two boards. So that will be a fun one. Now, a couple questions I've been getting is, how do I know what to get for the handle? Now, I know a lot of people don't want to do the bending of the handle, and some people just don't want to bend wood, in which case then you can make your sides taller so you can get a straight handle straight across there, or you can get a lower handle that goes straight across there. But I want to put this in here because this doesn't have to be something that is incredibly difficult. You just need a vessel that you can sink it into and put water into. And for that I have a 3-foot piece of 4-inch PVC. And so we're going to go through this, how to do this without a steam box. But then the question is, what do we get for our dowel? Because you're going to need to get this ahead of time. So I've done this with poplar, I've done it with oak, I haven't done it with maple, and maple doesn't bend so well. It's not a very flexible wood, and because it is a little bit more dense and it is diffuse porous, it tends to shatter. Oak is great because it crushes a bit. When you're bending a wood, you're not actually bending the wood. The wood on the inside is being crushed and squished down. The wood on the outside is not really being stretched much longer. It's the stuff on the inside that's being crushed. So if the wood isn't crushable, it won't bend very well. So you can do it out of poplar, but most of the time I tell people, the red oak dowels you can get in the big box store, they work great. But there's a few things you need to look for. Number one, they need to have perfectly straight grain, or really, really close to straight grain. So what I'm looking for on here is I'm looking for the cathedrals in oak. Do I have one that has cathedrals? Here's some pine. And in the pine here, let me switch over to this. You can see the cathedrals in here. So this arch, and this arch, and this arch. And these cathedrals are actually a layer of the wood. So every time you see that, there's either a layer coming out of the wood or diving into the wood. So what we're looking for on our dowel, and with oak it makes it very easy because you can rotate it until you see the cathedrals. Let me see which side, yeah, this side here. And there's a cathedral here and a cathedral here. So I know that there is a ring of wood that's sticking out here, and there's another ring of wood that's sticking out here. And if I try to bend this, it's going to want to break on those rings. So I'm trying to find a dowel that has very few, if no, cathedrals at all. And normally when I go to a box store, I'm going to dig through 20 or so dowels until I find one that is right.
It's really bright. I'm not sure that they can really see what you're...
Yeah, that is bright. Let me see if I can change the ISO on this. Come on. Uh-oh. And this, and... Oh, it's on auto, that's why. Come on. I'm not going to be able to change it live. Sorry about that. Yeah, I hope you understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the cathedrals in the wood. Because that's one of the best ways to tell if you have growth rings that are extending out of the wood and it's straight or not. Now the best way to do it is to rive it out of a piece of wood and then pound your dowel out into shape. But doing a large dowel like that, that's a much harder thing to do. So usually if you go to the big box store and you find a box of like 20 or so in there, pick through it and you'll get 1 or 2 good handles out of there. Actually, I think I got 3 when I went to Lowe's. So yeah. So straight grained dowel. I like red oak. It's very flexible. And if you get 2 or 3 of them, then if one of them breaks, oh well, you put another one on. They're like $3 a piece, so it really doesn't matter that much. If you want something a little cheaper, I've done it with poplar. Again, poplar is just a little bit harder to see those rings, so you might not know if it's as straight as others. So I hope that answers your question. If not, send me some emails and I'll answer them. Yeah, I think that's about it for this week. So next week we're going to be doing the resawing and getting that into the bottom. The week after that, we're going to be doing the divider and cutting the stopped dados and grooves for that, as well as sizing the divider for it. Or we might be doing the bending of the handle. One of those two. We'll see about that. So I think we got 3 more weeks of this, and we'll be getting through this project. So I've got a lot of fun ideas for the future, and I hope you're liking this. Any questions before I wrap up?
I have a couple.
Okay.
You want to go through them real quick?
Yeah, let's do a couple quickly.
Okay, so Richard asked, what about an old broom handle for the dowel?
Just broom handles are usually made of maple. They don't bend that well. Yeah.
Okay.
You can give it a try though.
These questions aren't necessarily related, but they were asked. Stephen Miller asks, does he have any Snell and Atherton heel shaves he uses for woodworking?
Can you say that again?
Do you have any Snell and, is it Atherton heel shaves?
I have no idea what you're saying.
I have no idea either.
Sorry.
Brad's Workbench asked, what do you look for when deciding is an old handsaw worth restoring?
I actually have an entire video on that where I look at handsaws and talk through. Number 1, does it have a kink in the blade? If it has a kink in the blade, no. Number 2, is there a lot of pitting in the blade? If so, depends. Usually the first thing that I'm really looking at is the handle on it. I want a handle that is shaped well, that someone spent some time actually carving and shaping it to a hand, not just a router going around it. A router going around it is just going to make a constant arch that doesn't feel good in the hand. So you want something that someone actually spent some time with a file and rasp and shaped it to a hand. And those are usually the big things I'm looking for in it. In the tooth, I mean, you're going to be sharpening it, so tooth geometry isn't huge, as long as it doesn't need too much work and the teeth look relatively similar across the blade. That's usually the big thing. So. Cool. Well, I think that'll about do it for tonight. I'm looking forward to next time. If you do have any questions, go ahead and send me an email, and I will try to get to those. So I think that's it. And until next time, have a wonderful day.
Hang on.
I'm hanging, holding on.